COVID has changed the way we're handling a lot of things these days, not the least of which are timeshare resort sales. So, hello, I'm Sharon Scott Wilson with Resort Trades. We're a 30-year-old media company serving professionals in the timesharing industry. And now today, we're very pleased to have with us Dave Stroeve. Dave is with ADS Consulting, and he is going to explain how there are 6 necessary things that you must do today to have a successful sales operation. But before we get started, please, if you're watching this on YouTube, smash the subscribe button and your bell icon. Make sure you're notified each time we present an event on the Resort Trades Learning Center. So hello, Dave, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm always so happy to be with you and your organization and supporting the timeshare vacation ownership industry for so long. You know, I started this out, I think we started months ago, and this is the last of a 3-part series talking about how to really achieve sustainable sales growth. And this is by far the most important of the 3, and why I left it for the very end to really bookend what really has changed, because sales has drastically changed in the last 10 to 15 years than ever before. I'm talking about centuries ago. And what really has shifted over the last 30 years is information. And if you go 30 years back, and I'm old enough to know this. I don't know how much of our audience is, but I'm sure. You know, we'd have to go to the library, look up things on Laserfish. There was what was called the Dewey Decimal System. Yes, you had to look up in the card file, a 4x6 card, and find out where your book was located and start doing the research that way. And so information was hard to come by. But today, everything that we know about the world of sales and the art of persuasion really has come from the understanding of who had this information. And, you know, information is knowledge and power if you have it. And so in the past, salespeople had more information than the buyers did. Well, what this did is it gave a salesperson instant credibility and leverage over the buyer. Well, fast forward to today, and this has become the biggest impact affecting sales in persuasion. And for example, I'll use this example later, but if you are a realtor selling homes, okay, you had to know the market data, the supply and demand imbalance, the price per foot comparables, and you had this information to leverage your position and to create contrast to sell your product. Well, today, the buyers have the same statistics as the realtors when it comes to basic information. You can go on Zillow, you can go on Redfin, you can go on realtor.com and really get all these different stats. And so the consumer now is as educated, if not sometimes more, than the people that they're talking to. So it has flattened the playing field. And so the problem is, about 10 years ago, just everything flipped. So information went from being asymmetrical to now we live in a world of parity. And so this is why we first had consumer protection laws back in the past, like caveat emptor means buyer beware, right? So we had to put in place these laws to protect the consumer because they were getting taken advantage of. Well, now they have the information, and the pendulum has really shifted with this. And I've got a firsthand example. I had a friend who their son was born with a rare condition called cranial syntosis. and it is a premature or premature fusion of one of the floating pieces within the skull. And so they went and started doing a tremendous amount of research, and they went and talked to a specialist, and he explained it in a very elaborate picture. And he talked about, the whole procedure would take 4 to 5 hours and what he had to do and the incisions and everything else. Well, they felt that was pretty extreme. So they went and did more research. They found somebody else who really simplified the process. And he explained that it's only an hour and a half, half the incision to remove the skull and everything else to really fix their newborn's skull. And so people are empowered now to know what to do and to make choices and have solutions based on this information. So the consumer today has the power in their hands. And so that's kind of a key thing that really has changed. So I started this program out by thinking of 5, and I expanded it to 6 because the 6th one became the main focal point that's going to wrap all this together. So you're really going to want to hear the 6th point that I have for you. And these points are critical today, critical for anybody in the field of sales or persuasion. And they are game changers that must be incorporated within the mindset of your sales team, if you're a salesperson, as an individual, because it truly will distinguish you and separate you from the pack, from the competition. So let's get into it and talk about my part 3. So if you don't know these 6 things, your sales will absolutely diminish in the future. So let's start with number 1. And number 1 today just goes back to what I was saying. You really need to become the expert in your field. You've really got to study your product, your market, your sub-market, your competition, and you need to be more informed than your consumer. And you just got to have a broader understanding of the information and knowledge so that you can be viewed as the expert instead of them feeling like they might know more than you. And what it diminished over the course of time is that trust and credibility, because through the decades, people were taken advantage of. So then they informed themselves with this information so that they weren't blindsided. Well, so now you need to go back to school and re-educate yourself and be able to have more knowledge than they do. And so let me go back to the realtor example, right? The basics are fundamental. Everybody knows the basics. However, you got to go a lot deeper today. You got to be willing to do what other people are not. You got to know the different neighborhoods in your market and the sub-markets, the alternatives that are available. You got to know the schools, the educational system, which ones are better than the others, the private schools, the other supporting businesses around. I'm a partner in a multifamily complex, and we were deciding on sizing our fitness room in our clubhouse. And what we figured out is we needed to know what the surrounding competition was. And we got a hold of someone who told us all the different places that were options so that we can decide on the space and the quality of the equipment that we wanted, so that it would add the value for the tenants renting. That's just one example, So you got to know, if you were a realtor, you got to know the surrounding parks, the amenities. You've got to even be broader than that. You got to understand the financial market. You got to understand what the bond market is doing, what's going on with interest rates, what are the trends, what are the shifts, what's the supply and demand happening, and where is that shifting within our country right now. You got to go further and know all your FF&E. You got to know the difference in all the appliances and the interior furniture and fixtures. And why? Because The price per foot that people use as a benchmark is very subjective, and people don't know the true cost of construction and what it takes to develop something. And so the broader you have as far as explaining the value proposition, the better you will be. And so the whole thing about this is you got to become the expert, and you have to outstudy your competition. So that's the first one. And so information is the resolution of uncertainty. And that's all that you're ever trying to do, is shift someone from being uncertain to certain that whatever your value proposition is better than the alternative. The next one is vital, because now we all have the information. We can just go to our phone. We can pinpoint what we want. Everybody's got it. And so we can educate ourselves on the spot. So it's not about the volume of information. It's the ability to curate the information, because information overload today is a real thing. See, we are bombarded with content. And just like this says, you know, the information that's coming at us every single day is equivalent to 174 newspapers, and the ads included. I mean, all this stuff is coming at us. And what this is doing is it heightens us to be more tense, more anxious in general. And here's a psychological thing about the mind. And there's a great, great book that talks about this, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He talks about mind one, mind two. And it's vitally important to understand this, because when the mind is in a state of being anxious or nervous, then it automatically has a tendency to freeze and to contemplate decisions, which means now my logic's got to click in, and now I'm starting to doubt or debate what's going on. And the mind doesn't like making decisions under stress, no matter what. And this is why salespeople need to learn how to curate information to provide it in a more logical and emotional state in consideration, and view it in multiple frames so that it helps the customer to know what the right decision is that is in the best interest of their needs and their desires. So providing less concentrated information is the key to really increasing sales today. And I want to give a real quick example of this. There was a study done at the University of Michigan, and they used JAM to do this study about information. So they had two displays set up in a mall. They had one with 24 jars of jam, and they had one with 5 jars of jam. And so the one with the 24 jars of jam, yes, there were more taste tests done at that kiosk. However, at the one that only had 5 jars of jam, the sales at that kiosk were twice that of the kiosk that had 24. Why? Because when you had all these choices and options, the mind wants to delay that decision. I don't know, I'm unsure. That doubt, that seed of doubt, someone's out, okay? When you simplify and you give less, then it actually increases, because you diminish the amount of options that people have as far as consideration goes. And so the point is to know more than your customer or your consumer, but to only share what is relevant for them. So that's point number 2, is to really learn how to curate information. My third point, and this really, you know, at the end of the day, you really have to be a good person in sales, in my opinion, and really just care about others. And that means 2 things. You've got to be personal, and you've got to be purposeful. So let me knock out the personal real quick. And we all know that we talk about, you got to humanize it. You got to bring your own element into it. You know, you got to be willing to be vulnerable, give up something about yourself, or if you're expecting others to share something more intimate, perhaps. But to be personal, you really need to frame the transaction that the goal is not to do something to someone, but to make the person want to do something for themselves. That's the goal. So when people do things for themselves and they believe that they will be better off, the closing conversion, of course, the retention and the referrals, all that goes up. The second is to be purposeful. And so this is critical. When people have their own reasons for doing something, their own reasons, they are more likely to do it and believe in the reason why they did it. Let me give you an example of this. I'm going to relate it to timeshare. So a lot of timeshare agents ask the question, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, John and Mary, how important are vacations to you? And let's say the client says 7. Average salespeople, they go, well, what would it take to be a 9 or a 10? Well, now the customer has to go back in their mind and they have to justify their number. And when someone justifies, that is entrenching them in objections. They're going to say, well, we've got kids and activities and it takes our time. We only get a couple of weeks off a year for work. We're just in a really busy life. And so we really don't have the time to get away. So all of a sudden you put their mind in a state of reasoning and justifying their decision. This is what great salespeople do. Instead of asking that, what great salespeople do is they ask, you know what? I'm somewhat surprised you picked that number. Why didn't you pick a lower number? Now think about this for a second. Why didn't you pick a lower number? Now, all of a sudden, the consumer needs to support the value of traveling, the value of vacations. Well, because vacations are important to us. We need to be able to get away. We need to be able to spend time with our kids. We need to be able to decompress and reset, and have some joy and fulfillment in our life. So just by framing a simple question and positioning it, you can drastically alter the mindset of your consumer. One of them, which is asking, well, why didn't you pick something higher, makes them justify their decision or their number. The other one makes them validate why things are important to them. And so this is critically important for salespeople to understand that you got to make consumers want to do it for their reasons, not for your reasons. My next point number 4 is, and this is, I'm sure my audience knows this. So social proofing is hugely powerful today. I mean, it's drastically changed how people make decisions based on the opinions of others. And so let's say, for example, you were going to go buy a dog pillow for your dog. I've got a little dog, Skylie, I was talking about. She's a Maltipoo. It's my wife's dog. And so let's say you went in and you did a bunch of research and you found this pillow to where all the comments and opinions were. It makes your dog feel like he's laying on a bed of clouds, right? And high ratings. And then you go into Petco and you start, you talk to a salesperson. They start talking about all these other pillows, but they have the one that was recommended by the consumers. Guess what? 83% of people today prefer to make their decisions based on recommendations from others. 83%. So if you as a salesperson aren't doing the education, this is going back to being the expert, and knowing what your audience is saying about your product or service, it will diminish your ability and your close rate to transact. And here's one of the key things that has shifted as well. Salespeople today have to be willing to talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is the public perception that is out there on social media. You got to be willing to bring that up and actually have valid reasoning and justification why those might be inaccurate. And see, you can use doubt on your side as well. So is when you plant the seed of doubt, that information could perhaps be inaccurate, now they will question what is being said and they're more open-minded to listen to what you have to say. And a lot of people shy away from this, but the most successful go in and they absolutely bring it up, because if you don't bring it up, the customer knows what the perception is, and they're gonna side with them over you, because the mind of consumer perception says salespeople are into this transaction for their reasons, not my reasons. So, and you can't remove that stigma. So then you need to bring things up to help support and validate your value proposition. And so we are social beings, and, you know, social proofing is huge, and it does sell brands a lot faster. So know what's being said out there. My number 5, and you guys have heard this many times, but make the buying process easy. And so, man, you've heard, keep it simple. Less is more. That's not what I really want to talk about. I want to talk about, there was a study done out of UCLA, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to find out at what age someone was willing to, or at what age someone wanted to do their first marathon, their very first marathon. So Sharon, I'd love to ask you this. At what age do you think someone would be most likely to do their first marathon?
Well, I had proposed 30.
You had proposed 30. Okay, great answer. Close to the mark, but not quite. And here's why I say close to the mark, but not quite. What they found through their research, and they surveyed over 1,000 people, they found that people were willing to do their first marathon when they were either 29, 39, 49, 59, whatever it was the bookend of that decade that they all of a sudden found people had an aspiration or desire to frame an accomplishment at the end of that time period. And what this does, when you understand this in selling, it's all about shortening the buying decision with your customer to get them to understand the urgency of needing to make the decision to either A, it's going to help improve your life, or B, if you don't do it, there is an unintended consequence that could happen by procrastination. And procrastination is it's a real notion in human beings today. There was another study done that they did this in a university. And what they did is they gave an assignment within 10 days, one within 20 days, one within 25 days. And they wanted to find out at what point did someone start working on that assignment. If it was within 10 days, it was right after the midpoint. So it was around day 6 that they started working on that assignment. If it was 20 days, they started around day 11 or day 12. And what this proved was that when there's an end to a decision, when there's an end to something, we get activated to take action, to be able to resolve whatever it is, because we don't want to deal with the consequences. It's no different than tax season. Think about tax season, right? We all know it's April 15th. When do you think most people start doing their taxes? In March, because they know the end is coming and they have to do it, or they have the consequences of the federal government and penalties and interest and everything else. And so when you bookend your buying decision and make people understand that there is a finite end, it will help you create more transactions. Let me go back to timeshare. A lot of companies allow people to give options to upgrade. Okay, well, if you give someone a year option to upgrade, then guess what? As soon as they leave that sales room, that option is out of their mind. Our mind's got to dump information because our mind is always on, right? And it's always processing through the most current valid information we need for safety and security. So if it's a year out, mind dumps it. If you shorten that option to 3 months or 2 months or 1 month, all of a sudden they leave and now they're thinking, well, if I wanted that and I knew that that was the best decision for me, but financially I needed to dip my toe in the water. I needed to just get started. They wanted to test it out. This is why in-house divisions within all companies right now are just doing fantastic, because once there's credibility and trust created by the usability of the product, they keep buying more. And that you just got to give them a little bit of time, but make it urgent and necessary for them to figure out if that consideration was the right one for them. And so I talked about number 6, and number 6 is to me the pinnacle of what has shifted within selling as a whole. And 20, 30 years ago, always taught from the very beginning that you got to find problems for people. You got to find pain points for people. Well, that has shifted dynamically in the last 10 years, because think about this. If you have a problem, if I have a problem, I now have information at my disposal to solve my own problems. I don't need anybody else to solve my problems. Let's say I needed to buy a vacuum cleaner, okay? And so I could go online, I could do all the research, Dyson, and look at all the different vacuum cleaners. And then I can go into a store. I don't even need a salesperson anymore. And I can go in and I can buy a vacuum cleaner. But see, the thing is I don't necessarily need a vacuum cleaner. What I want is clean carpets. That's what I want. Well, what's causing my carpets to get dirty? Is it there's debris getting blown into an area of my house that is faulty, that needs to be fixed so that my carpets remain clean? Is it the fact that my carpet is old and the usability life of it is done and I actually need to replace my carpet? So the thing is, I don't need the vacuum cleaner. I need clean carpets. And so, when you start helping people uncover problems, you need to become a problem finder, not a problem solver. You need to help people find different reasons on why things aren't working out the way that they want things to be with your product or service, because on their own, we all as human beings, when we inherently have an issue going on, we mentally will resolve that issue because it stays in our mind until it gets resolved. So the information today, the parity of information, has really allowed people to solve their own problems. So salespeople got to have this mind shift of going, you're not solving problems anymore. You got to find them. You got to help the person understand what the real issue is, because most of the time it's not what they think they need to get. There's something else going on that will help them curate whatever deficiency there is. And so this is one of the biggest changes that has happened in sales in the last 10 to 15 years. So when people know their own problems, they have access to the information. So stop focusing on being a problem solver, be a problem finder. And then just ending, put a bookend around this is, to be the exception. And I know that this is what everybody wants, is today, do what others won't so that tomorrow you can accomplish what others can't. And I think it's a fitting quote. Olympics were just done. She's still the GOAT, the greatest. I hope you received tremendous value today from this session. And I really enjoyed putting these together. together to help teams grow and to achieve more consistent sales.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. This has really been interesting. I wish I had a bigger notepad, but this is very useful. So really appreciate you and your time, and like to invite you back in the future too. But I know you're getting maxed for time with all your travels. But anyway, to our viewers, if you're viewing this on our Resort Trades YouTube channel, please be sure to hit the like button, type in a comment, and if you got something out of today's presentation like I did, please share the presentation with a friend. I'd love to hear back from you. It's what kind of keeps us going. So thank you. Have a great day, and we bid you adieu.
Thank you.